In the meantime, the New South Wales government is pledging nearly $2 billion towards fast-tracking a transition to renewable energy. It comes as Labor reveals it will enter negotiations with Origin Energy to extend the life of the Eraring coal-fired power plant beyond 2025. Joining me live now is the New South Wales Energy Minister, Penny Sharpe. Penny Sharpe, thanks so much for your time. We've spoken about Eraring intermittently over the last couple of months. Now, it looks like your best and only option is to extend it. Is that an accurate assessment?
Look, Laura, I think the real thing about the message that we got out of the Cameron O'Reilly report this week was that we need to do everything at the same time. So we need to supercharge the renewables transition, but we also need to enter a significant and important discussion with Eraring when it comes to their future plans and what that looks like as we're transitioning out of coal-fired power and into renewables.
So what are you asking Origin to do with Eraring? How long do you need to extend the life of Eraring? How much does it cost and who pays?
Look, the point about this is that we don't want Eraring open one day longer than it needs to be, and we don't want it to cost taxpayers one more cent than it should. These are going to be very difficult and, tough negotiations. So we're not flagging ahead of time what that's going to look like. But the point here is that we need to do the renewables work as well. We need to get as much renewables into the ground as quickly as possible. That reduces the amount of time that we need coal-fired power. So we're doing all of it at the same time. It's going to be a tough negotiation. The Treasurer yesterday said that he had some very high expectations when it comes to Origin and the way that we'll work through that, but we'll do that methodically and carefully. And really what we want to also do is give certainty as soon as possible to investors and to the community about how we are making this transition that we need to make.
You must have an idea of how long you need to extend the life of Eraring for.
Look, we need to understand it. There's some modelling around that suggests that if all of the renewables, everything went right, that would be fine and we don't need to extend it at all. That's not something that this government accepts on face value. So, as I keep saying, we need to do renewables as quickly as possible, but we also need to be talking to Eraring to make sure that the reliability stays there. Our job as the New South Wales Government is to make sure that households and businesses and industry have access to energy when they need it as we make the transition. And that's why we're renewables. Let's remember we inherited a roadmap for renewables that was over budget and delayed, and it also operates in a privatised system. The previous government privatised all of the electricity network. All of that makes it harder, but we're just getting on with it.
All of it makes it harder, the privatisation. Why do you say that? You're saying no more privatisation. At a federal level, they've got to spend billions and billions of dollars to upgrade the system so that renewables can actually be fed into the grid. What's that got to do with privatisation? Well,
privatisation in New South Wales is that the previous government privatised 4 coal-fired power stations and 3 distribution networks. As we're wrangling all of the parts that come together with the renewable transition, all of that is harder. But we're also now dealing with a private player when it comes to Eraring. Other states don't have that challenge. That's something that we have. We accept the challenge, but that's the context that we need to work in.
Okay, so again, do you have a ballpark of how long Eraring might need to be extended for, even if it is some kind of sliding scale here?
Look, we don't, because we need to have that discussion with them. Okay. It's going to be a tough conversation.
But
we
it's
also
not 20
need to
years.
be keeping on
is
top of...
Is it 10 or is it 5?
I would hope that it's much less than that. But, I really don't. We want coal-fired power out as soon as possible.
Much less than 5, do you mean?
We've got emissions reduction targets. Sorry, Laura?
Do you mean much less than 5 years it would need to be extended by?
I would hope that it's much less than that, but we need to have these discussions, and I'm not going to flag how long it would be because there's a careful balancing act that's happening here. How quickly can we get renewables into the grid? We're doing some great work with the federal government around firming tenders and getting the batteries that we need. We're doing important work to accelerate things like Central West Orana, the first renewable energy zone, getting that on track. we need to there's a very careful balance here about power coming out and power coming in, and that's the challenge that we're undertaking.
Yeah, and
renewables are the future, and coal-fired power shouldn't be open any longer than it needs to be.
Sorry to interrupt you there. Yeah, you're right, and I think most people are on board with that when it comes to reliability and where renewables eventually get to. But do you admit that this transition is just frighteningly expensive, and we are not going to see our power prices come down ever, really?
Look, I think that it is challenging, and it does come with a cost. There's a mixture of the way in which we're rolling out renewables in terms of the way that it's costed. Well, obviously, the New South Wales government's just about to stump up and invest, another $1 billion in the transition, because we have to do this. We've got greenhouse gas emissions targets that we need to meet. I only have to look at what's happening across the planet in relation to climate change, that we need to make our contribution to that. But secondly, we also need to make sure that the coal-fired power stations that are around are old and are getting to end-of-life use. To replace them is extremely expensive. And the cheapest and the best, this is what every expert says, is to get renewables there. New South Wales is doing really well when it comes to this. Investors want to come here. We're ready to get the 12 gigawatts of renewables in the ground. We're ready to get the 2 gigawatts of firming and storage that we need. Yeah. We're getting on with it. While batting, I always sort of try to say to this, there are going to be bumps in the road, and we're really upfront about that. But our job, and my job as the Energy Minister, is to try and smooth those as much as possible. And when it comes to consumers, there's things like energy rebates, which we've put a lot of money into this year, and we'll be watching that the whole way through. We want everyone to understand the need for the transition, but also for us to make it as easy for small businesses, households and industry to be able to work through that as we're doing it.
Coal royalties are increasing in New South Wales. This will replace a cap that was the states were asked to put in place by the federal government. You're essentially saying that cap is not working, aren't you?
No, the cap was developed in very, unheard of circumstances. It really was that massive spike that occurred in relation to coal prices and gas prices coming out of Ukraine. That's what forced that to do that. We did not want, both the state and the federal governments did not want consumers and businesses to have to wear all of that. The coal caps were really important, but as we've announced, yesterday, we're not going to be continuing on with those. We're going to work carefully, and as I continue to do with generators and as with my colleagues do with miners as well, around how we manage coal royalties, coal caps, and the way in which we support the community through the transition.
Penny Sharpe, always good to talk to you, and I know you're a busy lady, so thanks for making the time for us.
Good to see you, Laura.